and he was in his trailer writing away and throwing stuff away or whatever. And then he was great and funny as hell and awesome and just a regular guy. After Steven left, after he finished shooting his scene, Greg went in and took a piece of paper out. He was like, "What is this?" It turned out it was a scribbling for Misery. When we met with Rob, he really was unsure what he's like. I don't know what movie this is. I'm not sure if I'm making a horror movie or if it's a suspense, or I'm not really sure. I haven't figured it out yet. Anyhow, when we first came on, the cast was Warren Beatty and Bette Midler. That was the original cast for Misery. And then one thing happened after another. Oh, Bette Midler left the show, and then Warren Beatty left the show, and then they were like, "We got to recast. Let's try to figure this out." Da, 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 da. And I think they got James Caan. And then from what I understand, I think Rob was telling the story to us. He was in New York and he went to see a play called Night Mother, and Kathy Bates was in the play. And he saw the show and he's like, "Oh my God, there's my Annie Wilkes." And afterwards, he went backstage and said, "I'm making this movie Misery, and I want you to star in." And she agreed. Anyhow, our first step was to get Kathy Bates into K&B, which was a little dinky shop back then. I mean, we have a 20,000 square foot facility now. That was a 2,700 square foot facility. We didn't even have a life cast room. We just did it in the middle of the shop. And Kathy had to come to K&B, and this was right before Christmas. So I was the only one there. Bob and Greg who don't live in, who didn't grow up in LA, went home. Greg went to Pittsburgh. Bob went to Ohio to be with his family. Kathy flew in, and I did her life cast for those heads we built and any makeup. And I did it all by myself. I just did like 3/4 casts of different expressions, or screaming or yelling, all that stuff, so I could get a variety of it. But through that, I found out that she's a huge horror fan, and she knew Sam Raimi. They all knew each other when they came in town, and she wanted to be in Evil Dead too. And she read the script because they were all friends, and she's like, "I so wanted to be in Evil Dead too, but Sam wouldn't cast me." And I was like, "Wow!" So she really is in this. She was so amazing and wonderful, and still is. I mean, obviously, if you watch Kathy in anything, including like all the seasons of American Horror Story, she gives it 20,000% every time. That is a person who is beyond wonderful and great actor. So we did that. James Caan came in for life casting for his legs, and he was very hyper. And we had a hard time getting James to sit down and let us life cast his legs and all this. He was always up running around, and we finally I'm like, "James, can I get you just to sit down? I just need you to sit down for like, a half hour." And that was arduous task. So anyhow, we go ahead and do this. I end up doing the majority of the set work just because we're shooting Sibling Rivalry at the same time, and Greg is doing the majority of work on that. And we're shooting on the same lots. That's the great thing. So I'm on one soundstage, Greg's on the other soundstage. And Misery was not like a happy-go-lucky set. It was a little bit, we had Barry Sonnenfeld shooting it, and who's a great cinematographer, or was a great cinematographer, and then he became a director. And Rob still was unsure of the movie he was making, and James Caan was, a little challenging, and Kathy was an extremely focused professional, and we would shoot Kathy's scenes first up in the morning, the stuff that's on her, and she would play to Rob because at times James Caan could be a little distracting, and she needed the focus. So her close-up scenes are all played to Rob Reiner.
Wow.
And that was first thing in the morning. And then the second half of the day, Jimmy Caan would come in, and John Elliott was his makeup artist, and he was the makeup department head, and he would do the beaten up make and all that. And then I would slide on the boots or do the makeups or whatever. We tried to come up with a way with his legs that it was very fast to do, and he can get in and out of them. So Bob Kurtzman sculpted a series of like swollen legs and so forth, and they would just pull on like foam rubber, booties that went all the way up to his mid thigh. So that way I could get him off and on, because I knew after they said, "Okay, cut," Jimmy would want to get up and start running around. And I'm like, I got to protect these feet. And if you do makeups, it's going to fall apart. Plus, I'll never get him to sit in a chair for any sort of makeup. So they were slip on and off, you know. Obviously, we did the hobbling thing with that was cast of Jimmy's legs that we built. That back then there wasn't silicone, so those were gelatin with a rigid polyfoam interior that had like a little joint on them. So when you hit them, or it's wire, when you hit them, they would stay. Although we had to hook some monofilament to it, just because there was too much resistance. Anyhow, it wasn't like the most happy set. It was heavy. And then I would see Greg at lunch, and he was having the greatest party over there because he's got Carl Reiner, who's nothing but hilarious, and he's got this amazing cast of actors. They're all having a great time. Greg's like, "Oh, it's so much fun over there," and I'm like, "Will you ask Carl what he did to his son? Because like it's total opposites here. Like Rob is, not Carl Reiner." Anyhow, one day Rob came to set and he was so happy. He's like, "I figured it out. I know what movie I'm making. I got it. I know what." And after that, things lightened up. Rob was so concerned, as he should, as a great filmmaker, because he's a magnificent filmmaker, that he was doing the right thing and he was doing the film's its proper service, and to the source material, Stephen King's book. So things towards the end were a little bit lighter, and we shot the movie, but that was a movie we all knew was going to be great, and it turned out great. And when we saw Kathy on set, we all said she's going to get nominated for an Academy Award. There's no way she's not. And she did. She got nominated and won.
And won it, yeah.
Wonderful. And it's one of the best performances James Caan has ever given. And
yeah.
that's all attributed to Rob Reiner, who really, harnessed the wild stallion in there, kicking and running around. He really, really pulled the reins and was, but it was great. At the end of the day, I had a really good time. I was really happy I got to work on it. And I really like Rob Reiner a tremendous amount. And I don't see Kathy Bates often, but I've run into her here and there at some events and always get a hug. And she's always like, "Oh, Howard, oh my God, how are you?" And I'm like, "Kathy, how are you?"
Wow.
She's just a wonderful, wonderful person on top of being one of the greatest actors we have. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it was good. And when you're talking about Stephen, then we led into Green Mile, which is another Stephen King source material, and Greg and I oversaw that, and I did a lot of set work on that show, and so did Greg. Came over when we did all the puppet work, and that was a very difficult show as well, for a number of reasons. It was a very long, long, long show that seemed like it was never going to end. Thank God it was mostly shot here in LA on a stage, and then we went to Nashville for a week to shoot some stuff. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. It was one of the best scripts I ever read. When I read it, I didn't leave the couch, and by the end, I was crying.
Wow.
And I was like, this is because Frank Darabont is an amazing writer. Everything I've ever read of Frank's, I just thought was so well written and so brilliant and so emotional. He's a great, great writer. Hands down, one of my top 3 favorite, writers for sure.
It's also, Frank Darabont is also, arguably directed some of the greatest Stephen King adaptations in Shawshank Redemption.
The best. He's brilliant. Yeah. He's so brilliant and so great. And
did you ever get to meet Stephen King?
Yes, Greg and I. Well, Greg's friends with Stephen King now because Greg's, top of the horror heap. But Greg and I, we were doing Creepshow 2.
Wow.
And we were shooting in Bangor, Maine. And so we were finishing up Evil Dead 2 in North Carolina, and Greg and I got a call from Richard Rubenstein, who is owned Laurel Entertainment, and he said, "Hey, we're going to do Creepshow 2. Would you guys like to come and work on it and kind of supervise it?" And we're like, "Yes." So we finished up Evil Dead, and then Greg and I went to New York and started prepping with Ed French and Mike Tursick, the movie. Anyhow, we were shooting in Bangor, Maine, and Stephen came for one night to do a cameo, and we were hanging out with him and watching him drink a bunch of beers, and he was in his trailer writing away, whatever, and throwing stuff away or whatever. And then he was great and funny as hell and awesome and just a regular guy. After Stephen left, after he finished shooting his scene, Greg went in and took a piece of paper out. He was like, "What is this?" It turned out it was a scribbling for Misery. And so Greg, I think, still has it. He's like, it's Stephen King, something he's writing. It turned out it was some notes and maybe a page. He was like, forget this, threw it away. And it was Greg took it. and it was a piece of misery.
Framed it, it's on his wall. Yeah.
It's somewhere. Yeah, it's somewhere. We pulled a lot of things out of trash. Let's just say. I mean, when we worked at Stan's and Jim Cameron would come in during Alien and scribble like, no, you guys aren't doing it right. The Queen looks like this. All right. And then Shannon Shade like, okay, gonna take this out of the garbage, take this home. So, all of us have little pieces of like James Cameron drawings or maybe, Stephen King this, or you find little scraps. Like, oh my God, this is again, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So
absolutely.
We found a lot of treasures out there, which is lovely. So it's pretty cool.
Gaze into the abyss.